the Broncos make a sneaky good signing as Denver added some wide receiver depth over this last weekend, but the signing getting swept under the rug a little bit as it happened right around the time when the Broncos kicked off against the Philadelphia Eagles and would eventually go on to win and catch national attention after beating the reigning Super Bowl champions. But nevertheless, the fact that the front office for the Broncos looking to continue to add depth in the offensive room and build some, deep roster moves for wide receivers, even though this is just a practice squad signing, is a strong move and a strong look for Denver as they start to look ahead into the remainder of their season after, like I just said, a very crucial and potentially season-altering win for the Broncos this last weekend in Philadelphia. How's it going, everybody? I'm Mark Robinson, and this is Broncos Digest, your one-stop shop for all things Denver Broncos news and updates as we are well into the 2025 NFL season. And after a very notable win for the Broncos over the Eagles this last weekend, this is the perfect time to join the Broncos Digest family. Subscribe to the channel and make sure that you're locked and loaded and ready to go for the fastest growing and strongest source for Denver Broncos news here on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us in all of those places. If you already subscribed to the channel, we thank you so much for your support. If not, join the Broncos Digest family. We appreciate you guys joining and supporting the Broncos, adding some wide receiver depth and signing Samori Toure to the practice squad. Signing happened right around when the Broncos were kicking off against the Eagles, like I said, but a guy that was drafted by the Packers and got a little bit of experience, got a little bit of reps with Green Bay, and then essentially had a one and done stint with the Chicago Bears, is now getting a chance to join a very strong team in the Denver Broncos and potentially work his way up to a place where he's on the sideline getting some wide receiver reps and potentially getting back in as an NFL player. So, as we've said before, the Broncos left for Philly and then eventually left to London. They signed Samori Toure to their practice squad. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported this information on Sunday evening. So Denver now has a full 53-man roster and a 17-player practice squad going into their Week 6 London game against the Jets. That is after the fact that this signing was made. So Samori Toure, he's 6'1", almost 200 pounds, entered the NFL as a 7th round draft pick, somewhere in the 200s overall, out of the University of Nebraska, where he was drafted to the Green Bay Packers in 2022. In his 2 years with Green Bay, he totaled 13 receptions, 160 yards, and 1 touchdown, all of that in 22 games. So not the most blasphemous stats in those 2 years for Toure, not getting a ton of recognition for being this, late 7th round magician of a wide receiver. And then he spent his last season on the Chicago Bears practice squad. He was cut by Chicago coming out of training camp this summer. So he joins the Broncos after spending the 2024 and the 2025 season with the training camp of the Chicago Bears. And we just talked about that stat line of his 22 games, catching 13 passes for 160 yards and had a touchdown as well. But Denver's practice squad making the trip out to London. So it's unclear if Toure made the initial team flight that was from Philly or if he'll be taking a later flight, but it's most likely that he will be joining the team that he's newly signed with in London. And the Broncos kicking off their practice today on Wednesday, October 8th, starting to get dialed in and ready to go in London, which is super exciting for the Denver Broncos. Another notable aspect about Samori Toure is Zach Stevens from DNVR reported on the fact that he actually worked out with the team all the way back in September. So this has been kind of an ongoing relationship that's being built. He'd already worked with some of the coaching staff and had been in talks with some of the people involved in the Denver front office. It just took a little bit of time to actually formulate the fact that he was going to be able to sign and end up with the team. Obviously, this isn't a signing that you're going to see get implemented right away because he's just joining the practice squad, and the Broncos have a healthy, deep wide receiver depth chart and a wide receiver room in which they don't need to add somebody to their actual 53-man roster. But having somebody who has a little bit of NFL experience, was a good player in college with Nebraska, is notable for the future of the Denver Broncos, barring any sort of injury-related issues that happen in the future. So speaking of the Broncos, practicing in London on Wednesday, we're going to dive into some of their practice, but also some news breaking this morning around the Broncos. Nick Bonitto named the AFC Defensive Player of the Week for the first time in his career. Wreaked havoc in Philly, was all over Jalen Hurts and doing a really good job playing on the line as a rusher for the Denver Broncos. He's continuing to have a career season after signing a large ticket, a large extension in the offseason. And I've been seeing a lot of tweets and a lot of, takes in the media talking about how he is resembling to an extent Von Miller. And we may have our next franchise player for the defense for the Broncos alongside Patrick Surtain in Nick Bonitto, considering the fact that he signed a very large extension and that he's having a very strong year, backing up the fact that we are paying him, which is very exciting. So congratulations to Nick Bonitto on getting that AFC Defensive Player of the Week for the first time in his career. Hopefully many more of those to come, and also potentially in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he's one of the best to be doing it so far in this season. And if he can keep it up and if he can keep helping the Denver Broncos hold on to that winning record, I think there is no reason why he shouldn't be in the conversation for that award. So we talked about it just a second ago. The Broncos getting their first practice reps in London. There's Bo Nix up on the left, PS2 on the right. Court and Nick Bonitto down below in their practice jerseys, across the pond, getting dialed in and ready to go. I said this once and I'll say it again. I love this from Sean Payton, considering the fact that they are already there. I don't know, to be completely transparent, I don't know if this is a normal thing for teams to arrive this early for an international game. But I think that getting there, getting dialed in, getting adjusted to being in another country, on another time zone, getting used to the environment that you're in is going to be very beneficial for the Broncos. I'm not sure if the Jets are already there. I would imagine that by now they're there, but the Broncos obviously flying there on Sunday, 7-hour flight from Philadelphia to London, and they're getting settled in and they're getting ready to go for their international game this weekend. All right, so now that we have covered the fact that the Broncos are in London and getting dialed in, let's talk about the AFC West standings again after the Trevor Lawrence masterclass against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. The Chiefs fell to the Jacksonville Jaguars, a huge win for Jacksonville. They're 4-1, same record as the Eagles, and the Chiefs 2-3, having some struggles in their first 5 weeks of the season. And in a recent episode here on Broncos Digest, we talked a little bit about it as well, how the Chargers, after a historic start, have kind of been pulled back down to reality. They're 3-2 as well. So the Broncos and the Chargers tied for the outright first place spot in the AFC West, which is huge. And the Broncos in the next few weeks here have a chance to try and solidify a strong spot in the AFC West and the AFC in general, with some interesting matchups coming up for the Broncos. They've got the Jets in London this weekend. I think that this will be an easy game for the Broncos. I think that their offense is feeling like they're finally settling into the season and dialing into, their abilities and their capabilities. And I think that the Broncos will be able to handle the offense for the Jets and just all facets of the Jets. I don't think that they are as strong of a team as they were last year, and the Broncos beat them. It was either last year or the year before. Apologies for not knowing that on the top of my head, but the Broncos should be able to handle the Jets. And then at home, Mile High City, the Broncos do very well at home, but playing against a frisky New York Giants team with Jackson Dart starting in the quarterback position against the Broncos. This one, a little bit more of a toss-up, if you will, but I'm in kind of the same boat where I think the Broncos are favored, and I don't think that they'll have much of an issue facing off against both of these New York teams in back-to-back weeks. One on an international stage at 8:30 in the morning. That's Central Time. It's 7:30 Mountain Time for all of you guys local to the Colorado area. and then 3:05 p.m., 2 o'clock Mountain Time for the Broncos hosting the New York Giants. So good stuff from the Broncos management, making a sneaky little practice squad signing, but more notably, the Broncos feeling ready to go in London, getting closer and closer to this weekend's international game. And as always, we will be covering all things Broncos throughout the rest of the week, as well as the game in London. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, go Broncos.